I'm just checking to make sure that I am live here on YouTube. It's been like a week since I've done a live stream, so I'm just double checking to make sure everything's working properly. I hope you're having a nice day. I wanted to go live while I work on my self-portrait painting that is due at the end of this month. I don't have a whole lot of time left to make this painting, so I kind of wanted to just jump right back into the process and go live. Since I've been pretty good about sharing the process behind this painting, I didn't want to skip any steps. I do want to just kind of jump right into painting. I'm going to be doing another live stream today. It's March 5th. It's Wednesday. This live stream is being recorded kind of in the morning through the early afternoon. I have a lot of time to paint today, but I don't know how long I'll do the live stream, so we'll just kind of wait and see what happens. But tonight at 5 p.m. I will be going live again to talk about my my spring shop update at akunaarts.com that opened on Saturday, the March 1st, and is open until the 15th. So it's like a 2-week window to, check out what's available. There's a lot of different choices in artwork and reproductions that you can collect if you're interested, but I'll save more of the information on that for this evening. But if you're watching the recording of this live stream, I hope you'll check out my channel and maybe see what's being talked about and shared in the next live stream today. And if it's past the March 15th deadline, I hope you'll still maybe check out my website and maybe sign up for my email list to be updated or notified for future shop rotations. Okay, without further ado, let's go ahead and just jump right into this painting. So if you're new to this series that I'm recording here on YouTube, I started this self-portrait painting a while ago. I'm trying to remember what day this was started. It's been a few weeks now. Actually, it's probably been about a month since I started the painting, but I began sketching concepts and compositional ideas in my sketchbooks like 2 months ago, after I came across the open call for the juried show. And, I went through like 4 or 5 different drawings and ideas, and didn't really like any of them. Mostly because of the format of this panel. So I decided to borrow and take influence from a Giorgio de Chirico painting that I've talked quite a bit about in past live streams for this series, so I'm not really going to get into that. But I've kind of hit this fork in the road again where, I'm not really sure how closely I want to pull references from his painting. I'm leaning more towards a different idea now for the outside of the space in terms of the portrait. So the recent sketch that I was thinking about over the last few days, it's really hard to see. It's really small, but this is my current medium-size moleskin sketchbook. And we can see this is the kind of current idea. I'm hoping that it's legible at this scale, but it's really small. You can see it compared to my pointer finger how small this little thumbnail is. But essentially, this is where my portrait is, and I'm thinking about doing a window wall kind of behind my portrait, and then playing with different imagery and subject matter in the window. So I think this is what I'm going to do today, is try to establish the wall and the window, and maybe even start to set up the groundwork for what's in that that space of the window. And one of the things I really like about this concept right now is that it allows me to play with the idea of inside and outside, because originally I thought maybe I'm going to depict an interior space with the figure and then show a window opening up to an exterior space. But I started imagining, like, is there wallpaper that maybe I would try to research or want to incorporate from a personal history that I have with my family, or is there something I want to go and find and incorporate into the painting? And as I was just imagining this window, I thought, well, does the window cut out of the space, and is it cropped, or is it like squished and very uncomfortably condensed into the space of the painting? And I kind of like the latter idea. So I'm going to go ahead and try this out where the window is really contained up in the left corner of the panel of the painting. And I'm going to try to make it feel like we're on the outside of this wall. So this is like an exterior wall with siding and maybe a frame around the window. And then we're looking through the window into an exterior space. I kind of like this play on exterior outsider kind of space, peering into an interior space or wanting to find the interior space. And once that became a notion that crossed my mind as I was sketching last night, I felt like that's really an interesting arena of things to play with in terms of ideas. So we're going to start there and just see what happens. I've talked quite a bit during this project on wanting to, or having a desire to be really intuitive and open with my process, and trying really hard not to overly design the content and the concept. So I'm going to just start with that loose idea and then see where we end up. Before I went live, I did replenish my palette. So I have some mostly fresh piles of paint here, which is always a really gratifying feeling before getting into a painting. I'm realizing I did forget to add in one of my gray pre-mixed grays. So I'm going to find that real quick and just add that in. The other thing, though, that I've already started to try to think about as I was setting up the palette is, what is the overall color scheme that I want this painting to have? And obviously, so far, it's been very natural. I've been trying to accurately convey the color properties that I'm observing in my mirrored reflection from observation. So I mean, that has been completely documented through this series. If you're interested in watching how the portrait was made, you can go back through this playlist of live streams and watch that process. In the last 2 live streams, I really focused on my hand, and that's been a pretty big struggle. And this still has quite a bit of work left to resolve some of those problems, but it's closer than it was after the first attempt. But I realized as well that I kind of need more context in the rest of the painting before I can decide how far do I push the realism and the illusion of volume and dimension and all that kind of stuff. So I want to go ahead and start to focus on this part of the painting. So I have my Moleskine sketchbook off camera, just past my palette here, that I'll be kind of looking at for inspiration as I start to get things drawn out here. But one of the things I know I probably will want to incorporate is a fairly dark color that's going to be that outside wall that the window is attached to. So I'm just going to start to feel my way around the size of the window here. And I'm just thinking about proportions and shape. And as I've mentioned, I do want to have a I think that feels like a pretty good amount of space, actually. I do want to have the frame, a frame around the window glass sort of pane. So I'm trying to figure out where the edge of the frame is going to be. I have a piece of wood here that I can use as a straight edge tool. I hope you're having a nice day. Those of you who are watching live, and if you're watching the recording, I hope you're having a nice day too. Thanks for checking out this part of my process. This painting has been very time intensive compared to a lot of my other work in recent years. It's taken a lot more just time to really think about what it is I want to express in this painting. You know, I'm looking at this as an opportunity to try to capture some of my current feelings in life, whether those are positive or, you know, maybe we would consider some things to be more negative, but just growing, you know, observations as I get older, changes that maybe I didn't expect to experience, or challenges I wasn't expecting to face, those sort of ideas. I think that's kind of where my head is at when I work on this painting right now. So again, I'm just using this as a tool to map out the space of the window and like really compare the scale of the figure to the scale of the window. You know, if things are not square, I'm not really too bothered by that right now. I just want to think about placement of scale. It's going to be really easy to adjust, you know, if something isn't level. So I'm not really too worried about that. Alright, let's go ahead and grab some ultramarine blue, a little bit of burnt umber, maybe a little bit of alizarin, and let's grab some of my cool Portland Cool Gray. Whoops. I have to silence my phone while I'm working. I'll have to call that person back. Although it does look like it could have been a scam caller, so maybe I don't have to call that person back. One of the things that I've already been kind of considering too as I was sketching, you know, this architectural component to the painting is the lighting on my portrait is pretty specific, right? Because I'm painting from observation. I don't want it to feel like a sticker in a different kind of space. I want things to communicate and feel connected still. So I'm very aware of the, you know, shadow side of my portrait and trying to think about lighting that helps connect to the body, right? So if this is a window and it opens into an exterior space that maybe has, you know, daylight coming through the window, I want the wall to be a lot darker and cooler to help convey that sense of the light source. So we're going to try to start out by really darkening the wall part of the painting here. You know, and I might still try to consider bringing in a couple of you know, secondary kind of characters or symbols or objects that can adorn this wall. But for right now, I really just want to get some of those big local color things figured out, because this is painted from imagination. I'm not really looking at any kind of references at this point. So the more information I have on the painting, I think the more helpful it's going to be to figure out what it is this painting is conveying, right, in terms of the mood or the atmosphere. I'm going to grab a different brush that I can be a little bit more rough with here. Hi Noel, how's it going? Thanks for tuning in and checking out this live stream. Thanks for the compliment too, I appreciate that. Yeah, it is, you know, it's definitely uncanny and a little bit strange as I'm working on a self-portrait and the abstract kind of shapes and relationships, they hit a point where it starts to resemble what I'm used to seeing in the mirror. It is a little bit uncanny for sure. And, there becomes this, I kind of encounter this moment where it's like, okay, this is a representation of myself, and, it's definitely part of how I see myself, but it's kind of its own thing, right? And it becomes this extra other piece of myself. And I think for me, the eeriness comes from trying to figure out, well, what is the purpose, or what is the message that this version of myself is intended to create, or to convey. That's where I think I start to feel like, wow, it is a little weird, because it feels very important and significant, and obviously very timely if it's from observation, right? It's like, this is how I see myself at this moment in my life. But I appreciate the positive feedback. Thanks for interacting and commenting. I really appreciate that. I've done a lot of self-portrait paintings. Probably this must be like number, I don't know, 30 or so, I would guess. Since I really started painting in college, maybe even in the 40s. So it's not as strange as it was when I first started doing self-portrait paintings in school. But for sure, I think there is this kind of like existential, awareness of like, I look so much older in this one than I did in those earlier paintings. And there is this sobering experience of like, okay, life is moving by pretty fast, and on the one hand, I'm glad to be making a self-portrait because it's really pulling me into this present chapter and moment in my life, and allowing me to really connect with who I am at this time. And I think that's really how I view painting self-portrait paintings now. I think when I first started learning how to paint, it was mostly about, conveying a likeness, and, hopefully maybe even reaching a point where it's like, yeah, the figure feels like it's there, it could move, or it could, interact with me as a viewer and say something or do something. And I liked that challenge of just trying to create something that felt alive. But I think for just my own purposes, I think right now it's more of like a diaristic way of painting, where it's like, okay, if I live to be 80 years old or something like that, it's like, how do I want to feel when I look back at this painting? And how do I prefer to look at a painting that I made and go, well, yeah, that's accurate, or that feels like it contains more than just my likeness. It contains a deeper level of observation, that's more inward. So anyway, that's kind of where I think some of that eeriness also comes into play. It's, it's this hope to try to, try to reach a point or a place in the process where it's hitting something a little bit deeper for me. So but then I think because I'm aware of that, there's this pressure that comes with the process then. And I've been noticing in this painting more so than other paintings in the last few years that I've been catching myself feeling like, well, I don't know if I want to do this, or I don't know if I like this idea, and kind of second guessing myself a lot more than some of my other work. So there's a lot of pressure, I think, that I've been putting into this painting when I am working on it or thinking about it or sketching. And then on top of that, this is partially being made, the impetus to start the painting was because of a juried show that's here in the Cedarburg area. And, I saw that there was an open call for a self-portrait juried show, and somebody else had forwarded it to me as well. So I was very interested right as they had first kind of posted it. So I knew that this was an opportunity that was coming up, and for the last couple of months it's been kind of in the back of my mind as something that I really wanted to do. Because of that, I think that also creates a little bit more pressure to submit something that you're really happy with and proud of. So there's a lot of different areas of pressure that are coming in. But yeah, so today really I think the big goal is to kind of figure out what I want to do with the environment of the portrait, and maybe even start to see what the atmosphere and mood will be, and start to commit to an idea, knowing that, hey, this is one painting. It's not, the end-all be-all of my work, and there's a million ways that you can take a painting. It's not like there's a right and a wrong way. It's just, you have to just make choices and then decide how you feel. So part of today is just allowing myself to commit to something, and hopefully start to feel like there's this more homogenized feeling in terms of the whole painting, right? It's like, I don't want this to feel super separated from everything else, or the background to feel very separate from the figure. So that's part of today's challenge, is trying to connect to two ideas that were developed at very different points in time. I think that's always a fun challenge, is to sort of collage these different bits of our process in terms of the ideas. Let's see. So if I look back at my sketch, this feels pretty close. I think the window in my sketch went a little bit more towards the right, but I think in terms of the proportions, this feels a little bit more comfortable. I also didn't use a viewfinder to trace my thumbnail, so I was just guessing what the proportions were of the panel, which might have been a lot more narrow than the actual panel is. So I don't even really probably need to look at the sketch that much anymore, except for maybe like where I'd kind of place some of the ideas of the things that were inside of the window. One thing though that I kind of liked about the sketch is that let's see here, just add a line in here. Let's see where we're at. It's actually fairly close to the middle. Maybe we go down just a hair. So I want these cross sections in the window. And in my drawing, I had like 6 window panes that instead of just 2, which I kind of like that because it allowed me to center something that wasn't behind a vertical line. And I liked it in the sketch because this space was a little bit wider, so maybe I will make it, I'll wipe out a little bit of this dark glaze and widen this just a little bit more. Maybe we'll bring it to about there. Yeah, I mean, even just that extra inch of space is going to probably make this feel a little more comfortable. Let me find a ruler or a tape measure real quick. I'd like this to be fairly accurate in terms of placement. You know, it's like I don't want this to be too much of a guessing game. So it looks like on the top we have about 13 inches on the bottom. Yeah, I mean, if it's 13 inches on the bottom, then we're going to end up showing a little bit of space behind the hand, which wasn't the original plan, but that might be kind of nice anyway. So I'm just going to wipe out a little bit so I don't forget about that. But before, it was 12 inches, just about, which was, you know, that would have been a lot easier to divide by 3, because then everything, all of these would have lined up at every 4 inches. I'm just curious to see, you know, if this is, let's just put a few darker lines so I can actually see these marks. But this will help me decide if I want to keep it at 12 inches instead of moving it. So, you know, it's like this would come down here and here. I mean, actually, that's not too bad. I can imagine each of these panes of glass. I was worried that they would be really narrow looking and not, I don't know, they wouldn't seem very natural, but I think we'll just go ahead and keep the 12 distance there, 12 inches there. So first, let's find our boundary again. I'm just kind of eyeballing this. You know, I'm not one of those painters that will use a ruler for every step of blocking something in. It's that accuracy really isn't that important to me, you know. Which is interesting, I think, to talk about, just like this level of detail and level of believability and artifice. You know, I mean, I'm not really that concerned with really tricking someone into believing an illusion that is mathematically perfect. You know, I think most of my work doesn't have that quality or that level of detail. I think I like making work that you can look at it and maybe start to believe it, but then it's like it's obviously not, you know, super real. So you can then you can kind of remind yourself like, oh, this is an illusion, you know, or this is a depiction of something. It's not, or that it's invented. I think that's an interesting idea to think about too, that it's like, well, I'm not looking at something that exists. This is just kind of a hypothetical scenario. All right. Well, at least I'm glad I used a ruler to make these equidistant rectangles, because that would have been really challenging to try to freehand. But the rest of this, I think I can just kind of eyeball. It should be fine. Okay, that looks all right. That looks all right. Might as well soften those lines up here. So I was saying earlier that I think it would be interesting if there was a frame around the window, but it's tricky because I really like the proportions of each pane of glass right now, and I don't want to have to cut in to this amount of space. So, you know, it's interesting to already imagine, like, well, what if there wasn't a frame around the window? Like, how does that change the way that we understand the object and the architecture? You know, does it add to that level of strangeness or that level of playfulness that the painting, I think, is going to end up having? Also, just going to glaze some of this background color right over parts of the figure. I like that it's going to create this chiaroscuro effect and this very enveloping effect of this outside space. You know, I think that's going to be really important to make these things feel like they're existing in the same place and space. So we're just going to very lightly carry this color in, maybe even over parts of the hand. We might as well glaze over some of this in the foreground too. Alright, so I stand back, or I scoot back in my chair, I'm looking at this, and yeah, I mean, so far I'm really happy with this idea of the window and the wall. I think that's going to really ground the feeling of the painting. For those of you that maybe missed the intro of the stream today, I had shared this thumbnail sketch that I made last night. It's very rough and hard to read, but basically we're looking at a window with a windowsill, maybe incorporating a few objects that sit on the windowsill, and then we're looking out into an exterior space with another home or house with another window, and then kind of an open pastoral field kind of scene. That's where I'm at right now with the idea. So I'm going to work on some of those bits of information in the background, but before I get into it, I do need to take a quick bathroom break, and I'll be back in a few minutes. So hang tight. Thanks for tuning in today. If you have any questions or feedback, feel free to interact with the chat, but I'll be back here in a few minutes. Okay, let's see here. All right, let's grab a smaller brush that I can draw with and start to lock in a few of the larger ideas. I'm gonna grab... Okay, before I can start sketching, though, I do need to decide, what is the color scheme of this exterior space? I think it's like, is a temperature shift something that I want to consider? Do I want this to feel mostly monochromatic or analogous? Because right now with that purpley gray color that I just put in as the wall, the base of this outside wall, I'm thinking that's a pretty muted, earthy color, and if this was really saturated or chromatic, that would be interesting, right? Because it's so different from this exterior space, and that starts to create a relationship that feels more directed or specific in guiding the interpretation for the painting, right? So it's like, do I want this space to feel really different or very similar to the environment that the self-portrait is in, right? These are like early thoughts as I'm blocking in the painting. And regardless, I could always just pick kind of a muted system of color from my palette to put in to sketch in these shapes, and then glaze over them with more saturated or pure color mixtures. And I'm also trying to think about time of day as well, right? It's like, do I want this to feel like we're looking into a scene that is the middle of the day, the morning, the evening? What's the most interesting thing to do? And, I'm very aware that most of the time artists are pretty, especially painters, I think, are fairly private with their thought process, and I think sometimes viewers even prefer not to have a whole lot of information about what the artist was intending. I think that varies a lot. It's hard to really generalize this part of the process of looking at art, but I think, I'm aware that I'm intending to share the process, right? And so this is documentation that is intended to provide context or insight into the development of this one painting, which is something I don't typically do with my work. So, definitely take that into consideration if you're new to my channel or new to my process. It's like, even though this is very transparent in terms of how I'm getting from point A to point B in making this painting, it's not the norm for how I share my process with people. But anyway, getting back to the painting, I think that I like the idea of it being a very warm space, kind of a variety of cooler and warmer reds, sort of like from orange to violet, like in that analogous range of color, and then playing with chroma, where areas can be more muted or more saturated. And I think because of that color scheme, it might be more difficult to decide if we're looking at a space that is midday, morning, evening. But anyway, let's go ahead and just start sketching things in here. It's hard not to think of hang on one second here. I just want to make sure that things are going to be pretty parallel here. Oops. Keep hitting my phone with my hat that I'm wearing. Okay. I think that works. In my sketch, I've created a little bit of space for a windowsill, so maybe I should put that in before I forget. Let's go this way. I think I might also create a little bit of a lip on this side over here. Just so it looks like we're looking through a wall. We'll see how that turns out. So something else I want to figure out is if I want, like, how close I want this wall over here through the window to feel. I could raise the bottom of the home or the building up slightly. I think that might be interesting. I'm going to see what that looks like. Let's just try this. Okay. Now I'm going to figure out my horizon line. A little bit of orange. Looks like in this sketch I had it higher than the middle of the window, so I think I'm going to keep that idea. I mean, it might be nice even to line it up with the eyes of the portrait. That might work. The only problem with using this, this piece of wood as a straight edge is that sometimes it when I place it down, I end up putting paint in other areas that I don't want color, so I need to remember to occasionally wipe off this piece of wood. And this is just a piece of basically a 1/2 inch by 3/4 inch pine that's like, excess scrap wood from building frames or panels. And I used to have a level that I taped with painter's tape to the back of this, and that was kind of like a nice handle, but you can see the layers of paint that have created a little bit of a patina, and where that tape used to be, and maybe this summer I'll try to like screw in another piece of wood or something. The level thing was helpful, but once the tape started to wear out, I tried to epoxy glue the level to the wood, and it just didn't hold. You can see those little dried bits of the epoxy glue here. So I'm not sure if it was just a problem with the glue, or if I didn't let it set up long enough, but I'm pretty sure it sat for like a few days before I tried to use it, and it just like popped right off, which is kind of frustrating. I guess the other thing I could have done is sanded the wood a little bit to make it more abrasive and easier for the glue to attach or set to. All right, yeah, let's go ahead and line up the horizon with the eyes. One of the things I've been thinking about with this portrait is that the expression that I have in the portrait is very, I don't know, it's almost, I would say like it's almost pessimistic in some ways. It feels like a warning sign, or to me when I look at it, it feels like an uncomfortable expression or disturbed kind of expression. And that's honestly not far off from some of the days in the last few months, just sort of following our national politics and starting the new year with some disappointing news. I don't want to get too political, but what I'm trying to get at is, like, I'm thinking about the context of the expression and how that can add meaning, or how that expression is going to play off of other areas of subject matter, and it's like, do I want to lean into that? Do I want to play against that? What's the feeling there? But I like this idea, and this was something I was experimenting with in some of my other concept drawings. Like this one, for example, was the first graphite sketch that I was going to use as a reference for a self-portrait painting. And honestly, I could see this being part of this painting somewhere. Like, I could fit this and shrink this down to sit inside of this space. I think that might be kind of interesting. So I might still pull this pose or gesture into this painting. But, one of the things I was going to say is, looking at the landscape, there is this sort of, concerning, chaotic, apocalyptic space where there's this large looming smoke distant in along the horizon, and I like that play of the direction that the figure is looking. So that's one idea I have for the landscape. The other idea that I was starting to play with in the sketch that is really difficult to see, but you might be able to make this out. Like, here's that building, there's the horizon line, and then I was imagining this like storm sweeping kind of vacuuming effect of the landscape getting pulled up out of frame. I like that idea of this ambiguous and invisible force that is disrupting the landscape. I think there's something really universally powerful about that sense of mystery and fear and danger, and whether that represents anxiety, or that represents a person, or that represents a movement or a moment in history. I think that open-endedness is going to be helpful in setting the scene, and setting the overall feeling of the painting. So we're going to try that out and see sort of what happens here with this kind of pink-red environment. Let's go ahead and grab this brush again. For anyone who's an artist or a painter, and if you have questions about my process or palette, I've talked in other live streams about the colors on my palette, but one thing you'll notice is that I'm not using any solvent in my on my palette or with my paintings. I've started to become more used to using just a medium. And I really like this linseed oil based gel medium that's organic and non-toxic from Natural Pigments, or Rublev. Rublev is the manufacturer that creates the mediums, but the website where you can purchase the materials is called Natural Pigments, and this is called Oleo Gel. And I like it because it's the same base medium that the paint I use is made out of, most of it. I have some pigments that are walnut oil, but most of my paints are made with linseed oil. And then I also obviously like it because it's non-toxic. I don't have to really worry about fumes in my studio and breathing in harmful like off gases from alkyd mediums or solvent-based mediums. And then when my paintings are done curing after 6 months to a year, then I'll usually varnish them to even out the surface. But that's probably the one thing I don't really love about this medium and painting without, like a Damar turpentine type of medium, is that you don't have that really saturated, glossy look to the paintings. And then as they're drying, they typically dry very unevenly. And I've been able to help combat that part of the process by using an oil ground as my last coat of priming my surfaces. So I'm working on a custom handmade oil primed linen panel. So basically this is a 1/2-inch piece of plywood. I think it's sandy plywood is what I used, with a cradle made out of the same plywood material. And basically once the cradle was made, I sealed the panel, the plywood, with GAC 100, which is an acrylic based medium from Golden, and that helps to just seal the wood in case there's any like oil seepage that gets through the linen or on the sides of the panel. That's an extra layer of protection for the organic substrate of the plywood. Once that's dry, then I will use a bookbinding glue to glue down. As I'm talking, I'm trying to figure out how I want to do the value shifts here in the foreground. And if the sky is this bright, it's like should the ground plane be that value, or how dark should this be? So as I'm talking, I'm just sort of thinking about some of these relationships. But so anyway, once the plywood is sized, then I use a bookbinding archival glue to mount a piece of raw linen, and then that linen, once it's dry, is also sized with GAC 100. And then I've been doing like 3 to 4 coats of fairly thin coats of Utrecht Professional Artist Gesso, and then I'll do a light sanding before finishing it with a layer of the oil ground from Williamsburg. So that's the whole process of creating the panel. And obviously we live in a world now where you can just buy your materials, and there's a lot of choices, and there's a lot of really reliable companies out there that are making really great products. But the best stuff comes with higher prices, and I have a lot of these raw materials. So the nice thing about being able to make your own panel is that you have full control over things like the scale and the ratio, the depth of the panel, the structural integrity of the panel, and because of that, I'm able to really customize my surfaces. And then I can also think about texture and how smooth or rough the panel is. So it's nice to be able to have that kind of control before you even start your painting. And in the long run, I do save some money. I mean, I'm investing a lot of time instead of dollars, but I'm comfortable with that at this point right now. So let's see here. What I'm really thinking about at this point is the local color of everything. It's like, okay, I'm not worrying about lighting effects. I'm not worrying about shadows or highlights or temperature, chroma shifts. I'm just trying to decide and commit to the space and general areas of color. Because once I can see what the context is, then I can start to decide, like, okay, if the sun is maybe setting or, overhead, or if it's coming from this angle down towards everything that's in this exterior space, then I can go in and adjust properties of colors based on that context of the light and the light source. So that's a little ways away. And if you're watching this as a new viewer to my videos and my channel, there's a series, actually it's a painting challenge that I've been working on this year in 2025 to try and complete 100 of these little 3x4 inch eggshell paintings. And the idea was generated by a series of paintings that I made for a solo exhibition that was at a gallery in Milwaukee at the start of 2025. And I really liked that work of floating eggshell paintings painted from observation. And I was like, I really want to keep painting eggshells, but I don't know if I want to just keep painting larger finished works that are featuring that subject. But I had some of these small little 3x4 inch handmade little plywood panels, and thought maybe this would be the right scale to just sort of like do these daily paintings. And pretty soon it turned into like this idea of like, why don't I just challenge myself to try to make a certain number of these little paintings by the end of the year. So I just thought, well, 100 is a pretty common goal, and I thought that would be feasible with the other obligations and responsibilities that I have for the year. My problem that I typically run into is that I bite off a lot more than I can chew, and I sign up for too many things, and before I know it, I'm like double booked or stressed out and very unmotivated. So 100 felt very doable when I got the idea back in January, and I'm currently at 16 that are done. So I have not been keeping a very good pace, but the good news is that I don't have to follow any strict rules on the project. I can do more than one painting a day if I need to, and I've been averaging like 2 a week at this point. So I think in April I'll have a lot more time on my hands to prioritize that project and make up for some lost time. It'd be nice by the end of April to be at like 35, so I'm going to try to shoot for that and see what happens. But anyway, the point of bringing up that challenge is that in the last few of those paintings, I've been really thinking about color harmony and thinking about relativity of color and creating space that feels very continuous and cohesive. So if I grab one of those really quickly, I'll just show you here on camera. So these are two of the recent paintings in the challenge. I think these are number 13 and 14. But, what's nice about seeing them side by side like this is that there are some similarities between their color palettes, but there are a lot of key differences as well. And this was one of the first paintings where I decided to create a limited palette based on my color chart book, which I also have a video about on my channel if you're interested in this. If you're not a painter or if you're not familiar with color charts, they're basically handmade pages that show you a grid of colors and color property based on, you know, any combination of pigments that you might be working with. And so this is a book that I created in 2023, and I think it was all in 2023, looking at like 15 different pigments that I commonly use on my palette. And so I've been using the book as a source of inspiration for choosing limited color palettes for paintings like this. And, you know, the very long story to get back into the painting I'm working on is that by making some of these recent small limited colored color palette paintings, it's reminding me that you can create these really rich atmospheric effects, and almost feelings of like a filter over the subject by using analogous colors, right? So if I'm really keen and aware on subtle shifts in color property, it can create more of a believable sense of atmosphere and space. So I'm thinking about that already in this part of my painting, where it's like, okay, if I can stay within this range of my palette, that space is going to feel very cohesive and I think very believable, which will be pretty interesting and I think really nice to see. And if I can make the wall out here a little bit cooler in temperature, that'll really pop and emphasize the warmth of this exterior space that we're looking at. So yeah, we're gonna see what happens, but I just wanted to share these with you if you haven't come across this project so far. I've been trying to be really adamant about recording the process of making each of these. So I've been able to post a video, like 1-minute videos with time lapses and a little bit of a commentary on each of them so far, and it's been a fun, you know, project to keep up with. Hopefully I'll get to make one of those paintings later today if I have time. And just to show you, all of the paintings so far have been made with in reference to this one eggshell. And I started the project back in January, like I was saying. So I need to be very careful about taking care of this eggshell. I accidentally knocked it over once and it cracked some of the shell along the top hole, and you can see some of the cracks in here, I think. Let me see if I move closer. So it's already pretty fragile, but the idea is to make all of the paintings in the challenge by referencing that same eggshell. Okay, anyway, back to this painting here. So I'm working with very thin paint, mostly because I'm not sure if I'm going to keep some of these color properties. You know, this is going to make it easier for me to pivot and make adjustments if I'm not liking what I'm looking at, so I don't want to put too much paint down. And this is pretty typical, I think, when I'm painting from imagination and trying to find my way through or into a painting. Earlier I was talking about the lighting effects of this exterior space, and I can already imagine, like, if this plane of this building here is away from the light source, it's going to be a lot darker in value and a lot less chromatic. So I'm already thinking about a darker red and maybe something a little bit cooler in temperature. And we'll hopefully be able to use that as the painting develops. And I'm already starting to think about the window in this part of the painting. And I might even actually take this line out and have this window cut out of frame, actually. Chances are I'm going to sharpen a lot of these edges in the future as I start to commit to certain details, but for right now I think it's okay to just keep everything kind of loose. And that actually is pretty common, I think, when I'm blocking in a painting. I think I've found that it's helpful if I try to keep the edges a little bit more flexible and try not to lock in some of the shapes into like flat or clean of a way, if that makes sense. That allows things to feel more open, and like I can move something around if I need to. Obviously these edges and like the window separations are very clean and sharp, but I think part of that is more for me to start to envision the look and the feel of the painting. Now let's wipe out this area that I was just talking about over here. Alizarin is such a staining type of color that when I wipe it out like this, it's like it always leaves a little bit of residue of a warm pink color. Yeah, I mean, this is already feeling pretty good. When I look at my sketch, this is definitely starting to hit some of the relationships that I was envisioning. So far, I'm pretty happy with how this block-in is going. I'm also still thinking about what to do with the hand, right? I think in one of the earlier live streams I was talking about this pose with the hand sort of clenching almost into like a fist type of shape, but it's leaning against my cheek. And what I like about this pose is that it allows me to potentially, place something in my hand that I'm holding. And I don't have any real ideas that I'm like, oh, this is definitely what I'll do with that part of the painting. But as I'm putting things in here, that's going to hopefully help me narrow down some ideas for this part of the gesture and the hand. And again, I mean, I think it's one of those things where you have to decide, like, do I want to make the painting feel more and more like straightforward and really like directed with the meaning, or do I want things to feel like they're clashing and not making sense, or feeling maybe a little bit more juxtaposed, like they're two very different things that I'm mashing into one image. And sometimes things like that, it's like I know right away what I want a painting to do, but this is pretty typical. This moment that I'm sharing right now with the process is pretty standard for me, where I'm like, okay, I know I want this to happen, I know I want that to happen, but this area, I'm not really quite sure yet what I want to do, and I need some time to really think about it. But yeah, anyway, I think what I need to think about now is maybe even a little bit of the reflected color here. So I might try to just start with this pink hue and use that as a base, and then again, as things develop, I can always make adjustments later on to make it feel more natural or believable or whatever. But we're gonna just start with this as our base for this like very smooth and reflected like windowsill shape. And last night, I mean, I've been really contemplating this painting for the last week and feeling very stuck and feeling very, in some ways discouraged, like not thinking that it's going in a direction that I was excited about, or feeling a little bit lost, like, well, what do I want to say? I've already established this subject in the space with my self-portrait, and now I'm like, well, what do I want to surround the portrait with, and how do I want to not necessarily capitalize on the opportunity for the painting, but just be, thoughtful and really considerate of like the language of painting. It's like I could just create a big solid shape of color, but that felt like, I don't know, it felt a little bit too easy, I think, which, I don't know, maybe that's the wrong way to think about painting, but it felt like, I don't know, it just wasn't really what I was hoping for this painting. Like I wanted something that really had more to chew on visually. And once I started visualizing this wall with the window and thinking about space and thinking about outside and inside, all of a sudden it felt like, okay, there's a lot here that I can really use to embed information or to create almost like questions, right? It's like, it's nice when you feel like your painting is asking a lot of questions as opposed to answering a lot of questions. And I think that's really what I'm hoping this painting will end up doing for me, at least at this moment right now. I tend to change my mind about stuff like that as I'm working on a painting, but right now I think that's sort of my feeling. It's like I want this to feel more mysterious and suggestive, and really thinking about ambiguity and thinking about what can we discern and recognize really quickly, and what are the things that are going to be a little bit more open to different interpretations. And a lot of my favorite paintings, I think they have that balance of, yeah, you can look at this and go, that's a window, that's a house, that's a person, but this over here, I'm not quite sure what this is over here, And I think what can happen sometimes if you're an artist who has a lot of skill or experience using the tools, and like tools being physical materials like brushes and paint and surfaces and all that stuff, but tools also in experience of, color theory and composition and drawing and, these elements of art. If you're very familiar with how those things can be used, sometimes that can get in the way of just doing something interesting in your painting and feeling excited, or like you're being exposed to something new with your work. And I think that's really the thing I'm trying to be aware of, is like, am I sort of holding the idea of the painting too tightly by trying to control it, or am I allowing myself to take some chances and just not know what's going to happen? And I think that's where, like, I look at the color scheme of this window part of the painting and go, okay, that, to me, that's more of like taking a chance. It's like, okay, I know analogous color schemes, they work for these reasons, but I don't know if this, warm zone of color is going to work for this painting, or I don't know what it's going to do for the painting. And that's where it's like, it's exciting then, right? It's like, well, yeah, we don't know what's going to happen, but maybe it's going to become one of these paintings where you feel like you made a breakthrough in your process. And that's really, I think that's kind of what I'm hoping for through this point in my process. But again, I think even stuff like that, like, you kind of can't really control that. I think you sort of just have to work and then periodically pause and reflect on what's in front of you, and try to be honest about what you're observing. Okay, we're going to grab a little bit of this color. I really want this to feel like we're seeing light bouncing and reflecting here. And again, a lot of this is just like trying to find the local properties of color here, the value and the general, hue, temperature, all that stuff. And then I can start to decide where something needs to adjust or change. The weird thing, I think, that I'm already starting to wonder about is like, okay, if this is very warm, it's like, then does the portrait have to have a like more pink and orange reflection of light? Like, is that important? Or can it feel like they're separate? And I don't have that answer right now. I'm not really looking for that answer from anyone else. It's more of just a thought that's crossing my mind at this point. But like I said, I'm pretty excited about where it is, where the painting is at right now. I think there's a lot of potential here. This I need to start to think about and figure out. What I might do first, though, is play around with the landscape and see if I can start to convey some of the idea that I had sketched out earlier. So we're going to first soften the horizon line a little bit. I grew up in southeast Wisconsin, in a rural compared to Kenosha, which is the county that I grew up in, but the city of Kenosha was a lot more, urban than Salem, Bristol, that area of Wisconsin where I went to school and where I grew up. But the landscape in that area is very flat, and there are a lot of farms in that area. My siblings and my mom and I, we lived on a small hobby farm, and a lot of the landscapes in my paintings are for sure like inspired by that landscape of these big flat open fields of of rural property, and maybe there are some trees here and there, but whenever I'm inventing a landscape, that's generally where I immediately go. Is like I try to not put mountains in. Not try isn't really the right word. It's like I just naturally don't think about mountains. I immediately think about a flat line with some organic, like, bumpy shapes and textures to represent parts of the fields that I'm familiar with. Okay, so I already talked about liking this self-portrait sketch from a few weeks ago, and I could see this working in the painting, like maybe even between the windowsill and this building, like maybe the head could be sort of here in this space. I could see that working out and being interesting. I wish I could just take this and on screen shrink it to show the placement and scale that I'm envisioning, but we'll just have to paint that part. But then I think what I can do is really think about maybe this area over here. This can be a zone that has something happening, and in my drawing I was already starting to envision like the landscape being basically like vacuumed up by something that is out of frame. And I really like this idea of like of a giant vacuum hovering over the landscape, and through force and that gravitational like pull upward, it could feel like the landscape is being pulled away out of frame. So I'm gonna try to play with that visual and see what can happen. Oh, my dog Lenny found me. He's been sleeping upstairs on our bed, and if you've watched my live stream, sometimes I'll be like, all right, I have to go let out my dog, or my dog is kind of nudging me. But hopefully he'll be able to entertain himself while I'm working. But he is a pretty awesome dog. We're very lucky to have him in our life. The thing I'm going to have to be a little bit careful about is I don't want this to read like a tornado. I don't want this to feel like this big swirling thing. I just want it to feel like things are getting pulled upward. And what it might still read like a tornado either way. But what am I trying to say? I was in my drawing, I was already thinking like, oh, there could be like playground equipment or some sort of like swing set that is being disrupted, and maybe the swings are being pulled upward. I thought that was kind of an interesting visual that I might incorporate. But while that's stewing in my mind, I'm going to start to think about values and like shadows and that kind of stuff. So we're going to go over here and maybe even think about complementary colors by using a little bit more of a greenish hue. Oh, this phthalo green over here is pretty dried out. I can't use that. It's been a long time since I've made a painting where, I can just sort of block things in layers like this. I used to make a lot of paintings in grad school that had this like composite type of space where, through layers and layers and layers, I would just add more and more subject matter and information. And eventually I'd have this like really, busy and kind of like multi-narrative space, which, those are really fun paintings to make because you kind of don't know where they're going and you're just continually adding information. And in recent years, most of the work that I've made has been pretty straightforward in that, like, I know what I'm doing from the beginning. And this is kind of in the middle of those two ways of thinking and working, where I'm kind of, I'm grounded by an initial idea. And then in this zone, I'm like, okay, if I can put in the landscape, then I can figure out where to place maybe that other portrait, where to place this moment of, disruption. And I could still keep adding more and more details and pieces of information, which I think is going to probably be the case for this painting. But I don't really know why I started talking about that, but basically, there is something kind of satisfying about understanding the environment before adding in other subjects and like the portrait or other figures, sort of setting the stage. I think in my head, that's sort of what I'm doing at this point in the painting. Creating like the backdrop for the action to occur. Just for a second, I want to share this DeCurico painting again. One of the things when I was sketching last night that I really thought was kind of interesting or nice is that the ledge that he has at the foreground of his painting, he's showing us this arrangement of objects, one that is very literally concrete or marble, and gonna last hundreds and hundreds of years, or longer, and this very ephemeral object, this orange sort of fruit that's in the foreground. And I brought down this orange a few weeks ago when I started referencing DeCurico's painting and thinking, well, maybe this will be the object that I'll put in my painting. And I think I'll still incorporate this and paint it from observation at some point. I'm not sure how I want to do that, but I know it's probably going to be on the windowsill somewhere, maybe in the middle here. Usually I try not to put things right in the middle of a distance, but if the figure is going to be over here, maybe then, I don't know, maybe, I could also maybe put the orange over here. That's a future thing to resolve, so I'm not going to worry about that right now. It's not a big deal. Okay, the other thing I'm going to do is create a little bit more of a chromatic shift in the foreground using cadmium red light, cadmium orange, and a little bit of burnt sienna. Just want to see, this is pretty dark. Maybe I should lighten it up a little bit. I want to convey this sense of depth by raising the chroma in the foreground and maybe even the temperature, having the red analogous scheme lean a little bit more towards the orange to make it feel close to us. These separations of the window frame will probably be one of the last things I'll really try to lock in, I think, just because otherwise I'm having to very carefully paint everything right up to the edge, and I don't really want to have to worry about that. So we're just going to keep that line pretty loose right now as we blend this up into the landscape. So I can scoot back and see how this is going. Let's see, maybe I'll just adjust this a little bit. I have these lights kind of over to the right in my studio here. When I've been working on the portrait, I've had them turned off, and just to keep a continuous, cohesive type of lighting on the portrait. But today I figured if I'm showing the whole painting, maybe it would help to have that extra light, but kind of feels like it's creating a lot of glare. And I'm going to see if I can block out some of that glare. Hard to tell how much this actually is helping. But we'll try that for the rest of the session, and hopefully that can help reduce some of the glare that we have. I'm really tempted to cool off the temperature on this outer wall, but I can also glaze over it at a future point. That wouldn't be a big deal. I think Okay, I like where this is going. I think lightening up the sky right along the horizon that's a pretty good move. It really helps to create a bit more depth in the painting. I like that there's a slight piece of what feels like less chromatic, kind of a muted purpley gray color. So I might mix something that represents a little bit more of that to put in some details of trees or, distant information. Yeah, we'll see. And then, I think this is definitely going to have to change, this pink. I think we might have lost, we lost a few minutes there of information possibly. But I was just going to say that I kind of like right now that part of the painting is this very green, almost like phthalo green color. That might be something that I'll choose to hang on to as I keep working on the painting, because that complements this space really well. And I think if we're talking about like an interior space, that blue light of TVs and screens is something that I could see working well in this painting. But I am going to take another break here just to go let my dog outside and maybe grab a snack, and then I'll come back and keep working. But we'll leave the stream going for a few minutes. Feel free to check out and come back if you're still watching. Otherwise, you're welcome to hang out. I'm going to change screens here, but I will be back shortly.
lights out of my house.
For a limited time, get 1 year of U.S. Cellular's home internet plus mobile service for just $35 a month. Built for us. Terms apply. See uscellular.com for details.
Purpose doesn't just come to you. You have to search for it. Whether it's deep in the forest or high in the mountain. It could be in a conference room or aircraft hangar or in a secure, undisclosed location. It could be just beyond wherever you are right now. With over 500 Army civilian careers to choose from, find your next level at armyciviliancareers.com.
Goodbye, minivan. Mama got an instant online offer to sell you to CarMax. Cause Mama's done with carpooling, songs with no swear words, finding old chicken nuggets. Mama's ready for a red hot convertible.
Instant online offers, CarMax.
Cousin Sauce is stepping up their game this Lenten season with a decadent delight featuring lobster. You heard that right, lobster. This new limited-time only lobster salad sub features lobster mixed with Cousin's signature mayo over a bed of lettuce and topped with onions, tomato, and every seasoning on their famous Italian bread, baked fresh daily. Order the new lobster salad sub at any Cousin's location, online or via their mobile app. Cousin Subs, we believe in better.
Okay, and we're back. I was just talking about possibly wanting to cool off some of the temperature in this wall, sort of background. And I don't know if I'll do that today, but I might try to put in the siding lines, those horizontal lines. That might be a detail that, I think would be helpful to have. And then if it dries, I can go back and glaze over it. So maybe I'll do that right now while I'm still figuring out the next few steps. So we're going to use this. Man. I went outside to let out my dog, and it is snowing outside today, which I did not expect because this weekend it's supposed to get up to 50 degrees, which is going to be really nice. But I was not expecting to see snow. I think next Tuesday it's going to be in the low 60s even. So as badly as I want to start to feel like spring is here, I've been in this moment enough times to know that it's just teasing us to not assume that it's going to start to just keep warming up every day. You know, this is where I could see using a level would be actually probably smart, but I'm not going to do that. Okay. Oops. Let's do this. So, you know, I said I wanted siding, and this is going to be so narrow. I mean, it's still. I think there is still siding that's this narrow. I think that'll be okay. It'll still work. My fear is always like when I do something and it's so out of proportion that it's distracting, and then it's, you know, becomes a point of interest in the painting, and that's not really the point. So I have to be mindful of correcting those moments. I think what I'm going to do is just start on this side.
your taxes for you, while you go about your day getting real-time notifications about their progress and the most money-back guarantee. Now this is taxes. Intuit TurboTax. Get an expert now on TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live Bill Service. Real-time updates only on iOS mobile apps. See guarantee details at TurboTax.com/guarantees.
T-Mobile home internet rollout. What you doing, Zach? I'm rehearsing for our T-Mobile home internet radio commercial. Why don't we do a little vocal warm-up? I love their fast speed. I love their fast speed. I love their fast speed. Try singing that. T-Mobile has price lock. They won't raise your rate on internet. Just one cord. It's an easy set. Get T-Mobile home internet for just $35 a month with auto pay and any postpaid voice line.
T-Mobile home internet is all about speed, value.
What you doing, Jack?
First things, there are so many benefits, you gotta talk fast.
T-Mobile home internet ranks #1 in customer satisfaction for home wireless internet by J.D. Power.
Wow, you are good.
Start singing it. T-Mobile has price lock.
They won't raise your rate on internet.
Hulu and Paramount Plus on
Get T-Mobile home internet all in for just $55 a month with auto pay and any postpaid mobile line.
Okay, let's see. It's 1:30. I've been streaming for 2 hours and 15 minutes. Trying to figure out what else I want to try to accomplish today in this painting. I'm happy with this siding. Those horizontal lines, I think, create a really interesting pattern in the painting, and that like rhythmic pacing, I think, is bringing, kind of a weird but also calming component to the space. So I'm happy about that. I'll probably mimic a similar type of siding, horizontal patterning on the building that's here at some point. I'll probably wait to do that. I don't know if I'll do that today. I kind of want to try and block in the area for this other portrait, this like backside portrait that I made this sketch of. I think that would be pretty interesting. Just sort of trying to imagine, like, are there any other subjects or, you know, actors or pieces of information that I'm hoping to maybe place in the painting somewhere. You know, with this patterning of the siding of the wall, you know, I could also see some sort of, you know, hanging piece of information or something maybe coming up from the outside of the frame on the bottom, like a plant or part of an object, some kind of object. Not sure what that would be at this point. I might not do that. I don't know. I think I'm going to keep going on this and then decide what to do. And it definitely feels like there should be something interacting with the hand in the painting. I just don't know what that's going to be. But yeah, I mean, overall, I'm pretty satisfied with the decision to go this direction for the environment. I think this like double exterior, you know, play of space is going to be really fun to work with. I have one opportunity for talking about interior space that I think will also be really important for the overall meaning of the work. I don't think I actually had put anything in that window shape in my sketch, so I'll have to think about that. It's a pretty decent amount of space. I can paint something fairly, you know, in a fairly detailed way if I wanted to really narrow my tools down and work with really small brushes. I could probably get quite a bit of detail and information in that window. It's just a matter of figuring out what's going to go in there, I think, at this point. You know, I might even flip back through some of my other sketches that I was doing, you know, a few months ago. Also still have this sketchbook with a few ideas that I might revisit. We'll see. I like the idea of another figure that's turned away from the viewer. I think that might be pretty interesting. You know, and I've got these like character ones too, where, you know, I'm imagining myself as another type of figure or, you know, some kind of a character, but I don't know. I don't know if I'll go that direction at all. You know, honestly, it could be interesting to have another portrait like this in that window over here, you know, looking back out at the view at the other figures in the painting. I think that could be interesting. So there's that possibility too. You know, this is where it's like it's almost better not to have too many ideas, because then you can just sit and like keep juggling, you know, these different directions and wondering which was the right one to head towards. But I think right now, for the next 30 minutes or so, I'm going to use this as a reference. I'm just going to attach this to my easel that's been holding the mirror for the portrait and use that as kind of a reference. figure out the size here. And I want to keep this in the same color scheme as other parts of this space in the painting, so I'm not going to use anything too crazy in terms of color choices. And maybe we'll use the maul stick for this, that way I'm not, you know, sliding around the panel too much. Okay, let's see. In terms of proportions, I like this moment here where we can really see the shadow of the light of this space. So I think I'm going to figure out the overall size here. I think if the head is just over this middle cross beam here, I think that would be interesting. Let's bring this down. Kind of just trying to like rough out the proportions. Should probably try not to use too flat of a dark color. Let's go with a little bit more alizarin for this. Like I said before, I'd say I could see putting in another portrait over here. So I'm just going to put in a quick little line drawing just so I don't forget about this idea. And then that can also help me determine if this proportion or scale feels right. I mean, maybe it should be a little bit bigger actually. So I'm going to bring the head up to like here, I think. Just so it's above the bottom of this window. I don't want it to line up with the top of that window, kind of like where it is right now. I think that's awkward. So I'm going to enlarge this a bit. Maybe we'll put the bottom of the head around here. And then Yeah, I think that, these proportions I think are a little bit more comfortable by making the head slightly larger like this. I think it fits the flow of the relationships, like the scaling down of the body, I think is going to be really interesting when this is all said and done. It helps to block in some of the bigger value shapes, like darker shapes, to gauge, how much presence does this portrait in the middle have. It's also nice that it's not right in the middle of the composition. I think this is going to help create more of a dynamic relationship in terms of the space, because these two are going to feel grouped. And then if we still have something happening back in this corner here, I think that'll still be really important for the composition overall, to kind of bounce our eye in these different places. Kind of is going to, I feel like it's going to create a little bit of a triangular effect, especially if I do put something down in the hand, some sort of like, small object. I think that'll be really, I don't know, it'll be a pathway for the eye to move around in a very active way, which I'm really happy about. Just want to get some color to start to represent my face.
Search for it. Whether it's deep in the forest or high in a mountain. It could be in a conference room or aircraft hangar or in a secure, undisclosed location. It could be just beyond wherever you are right now. With over 500 Army civilian careers to choose from, find your next level at armyciviliancareers.com.
Got a little bit of a mullet going on in this portrait right now. Hopefully I can fix that at some point, because I don't actually have a mullet.
She pays no hidden fees, and she can access her money 24/7. Digital deposit accepted. Debit card enhanced. Nothing keeps you pinned from starting her new lifelong hobby. And the next one after that. Landmark Credit Union. Banking made easy. Insured by NCUA. At Olenia at Disney Resort in Hawaii, time moves as you wish. You can take it slow down the lazy river, relax at the spa, or splash down the water slides, or hang with some favorite Disney pals. Here, there's time for it all. Plus, find spring savings on select rooms and dates. Learn more at DisneyOnLenny.com.
This space over here is getting narrower and narrower, but I'm going to try my best not to lose this little cast shadow that I really like. Yeah, I mean, this is definitely starting to feel a lot more dimensional, which is exciting, just to have other moments in depth and this illusion of space to move and push the eye deeper into the image. I think this is going to be really fun to work on now. So I was feeling kind of not stuck, but just like a little stale with the process, where all I had was this, volumetric singular subject and this open empty space. So now it feels like I have something to kind of push against in the painting, for narrative or for contrast and that kind of stuff. And this is probably going to change quite a bit too, I imagine, that figure. But, I think for today, having a block in like this is already really helpful. I do, however, want to push this area real quick. I don't want to leave that as bright and as high contrast. So I'm going to grab a little bit of my Portland Cool Gray, ultramarine blue, and a little bit of cadmium green. Because again, I don't want to make a shape that feels really out of place in terms of color, but I do want to make it feel a little bit different than everything else. I'm going to try to see how this feels if I put in this darker kind of muted color here. And part of me also wants to put in another window in this space somewhere. I think that might be interesting, but that might be a little too redundant though for this painting too. So I don't know, I'll think about it. There's an interesting interpretation I'm starting to acquire now with this, having 3 of these portraits in the painting. I feel like it starts to open up space to think about time a little bit more too. Like, do I create this shift in age between the portraits? Do I make them look all similar in age? Do I change the portraits to not be the same person? I think there's some interesting opportunities now by having these 3 figures present in the painting, especially since all of them are similar with what is being shown. They're all kind of like shoulders and up, or like chest and up. So it's interesting to have correlations like that, but to maybe play against that, I could change parts of their appearances maybe. I think there's a lot of different ways I feel like I could start to push some of the details and the information. Like, there's something really specific about this largest portrait looking at the viewer, knowing that they're, or maybe not knowing that there's this other space with repetitions of the same person, also engaging with the viewer, but also engaging with the other figures. I think that's kind of an interesting situation. And, again, thinking about this environment that's going to hopefully start to read more like a space that is a little bit of, has a little bit of chaos or lack of control, or some sort of looming danger that is jeopardizing the future or the health of the figures. I think there is this underlying desire to make it feel like that for me at this point right now. I don't know, again, this could evolve and change, but I could see this space really carrying some of that type of language. But now that I have 2 more figures that I can use, I think that opens up more of a internal dialogue, with the self and with perception of the self, that I'm really excited to kind of play around with. But yeah, I mean, if people have ideas or interpretations that they want to share, if you're watching this, feel free to leave a comment down below this video. I'm always curious to read what other people see in my work, and a lot of times there's something different that I didn't consider or I'm not currently seeing before somebody shares their feedback like that. So if you're willing, I would really appreciate it. No pressure, but the other thing, because I think I'm going to start to wrap up here and have some lunch and maybe work out before my live stream at 5. I have a few hours before I'll be going live again. I'm hoping that the live stream tonight is like an hour and a half. I'm going to try not to spend too much time really, talking in circles, but the point of the live stream tonight is to introduce the work that I have available in my online spring shop update, which I've talked a little bit about in other streams as I was preparing for the launch, which was this past weekend on Saturday. But tonight I'm hoping to kind of go one by one through the paintings that are available and maybe talk a little bit about some of the other listings and just provide some more context on the work for people who maybe don't follow me on other platforms or haven't seen my work in person before. You never know. I think if somebody might be interested in purchasing something, and it might be nice to have a little bit more of an access point into the work for those people. So that's one of the reasons why I'm going to try this presentation tonight, but it's going to be pretty casual. I'm hoping to, like I said, keep it within an hour and a half, and we'll see what happens. But I think for this live stream, I'm going to go ahead and call it. Thank you to everyone who tuned in live. Thank you to I think, was it Noah or Noel? No, it's either Noel or Noel, I'm not sure. For tuning in, I really appreciate your support and interest in my work. And to everybody else who tuned in, thank you so much. It means a lot to me that you're interested in what I'm working on. But stay tuned for the development of this painting, and we'll see where it ends up. Maybe I'll work on it again tomorrow. I also have to work on my illustration, one of my illustration paintings for my portfolio in the next few weeks as well. And I have to work on going through my taxes, and getting ready to submit my taxes. So there's a lot to do, but it's all, fun work. I'm very grateful to be able to do this full time right now. But anyway, thank you so much for watching. If you're not already subscribed to my YouTube channel, please consider subscribing and supporting the channel. If you want to be notified when I have new videos or when I'm live, make sure to hit that little bell button on my channel. And if you haven't been over to my website, I hope you'll maybe take a moment today and check that out. You can reach my website through the links that I have in this video. Otherwise, you can Google acunaarts.com and you should be able to find it. So, all right, everyone, thank you so much for watching. I will see you in another video soon, and have a great rest of your day. Take care.